Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
In the highlands of Ethiopia, where clouds drift like holy incense across jagged mountain cathedrals, rests a forgotten memory hidden in sacred ink and parchment. The land whispers stories to those willing to listen, not the stories told by Europe or preserved in the sanitized translations of Western theology, but those scribed in ancient Guizi, deep within the leather-bound volumes of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. Here, beneath the veils of time and colonial misinterpretation, lies a shocking tale that the figure we call Noah, builder of the ark, survivor of the deluge, was not one man, but one of many. Ethiopia's Bible, older and more expansive than the King James Version, preserves an alternate flood narrative with layers lost to the Western world. It tells us that Noah was a title, a lineage, a mission, shared by more than one soul, ordained to preserve life against celestial wrath. The standard biblical narrative handed down from European scribes speaks of one Noah, a righteous man chosen by God to build an ark to save his family and the animals from a worldwide flood. But this single-threaded tale, largely derived from the Masoretic text and trimmed during translation into Greek and Latin, simplifies and compresses older, richer traditions. Ethiopia, which preserves the oldest continuous Christian tradition in the world and maintains a version of the Bible with up to 88 books, many more than the 66 in the Protestant canon, offers a version of sacred history far more nuanced. Among the apocryphal and deuterocanonical texts revered in Ethiopia is the Book of Jubilees, known in Guizi as Kufil. This text, long preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition while largely rejected or forgotten in the West, provides extensive genealogies and retellings of the Genesis narrative. Within its passages, Noah is not simply an individual, but a prophetic archetype, a custodian of the covenant between the Creator and humanity. The Book of Jubilees introduces us to pre-flood and post-flood patriarchs who echo the mission and moral stature of Noah, individuals whose names, roles, and actions mirror the famed ark builder. These figures are not identical, but they fulfill the same sacred function across epochs, to preserve divine law amidst the corruption of the earth. In these writings, we find that before Noah there were predecessors who stood against the wickedness of their age, building sanctuaries, passing down wisdom, and acting as spiritual mediators. And after the flood, others arose, sons and descendants of Noah, such as Shem and his line, who continued this work. In the Ethiopian understanding, this continuation is not merely genealogical, but spiritual and functional. One such figure is Melchizedek, a mysterious priest-king who appears in both Genesis and the Book of Enoch. Ethiopian tradition links Melchizedek to Shem and elevates him as a Noahic figure in his own right, one who receives the eternal priesthood and carries on the divine order amidst the moral collapse of humanity. The Book of Enoch, another cornerstone of the Ethiopian canon but excluded from Western Bibles, paints an even more dramatic picture. Enoch, great-grandfather of Noah, is a figure who walks with God, is taken into heaven, and is entrusted with visions of the flood, the fallen angels, and the destiny of mankind. In Ethiopian tradition, Enoch too is a kind of Noah, one who preserves spiritual knowledge rather than animals, one who warns the people of their coming doom. Enoch's role as a prophet and intercessor aligns with the Noahic archetype, and in fact, his writings foretell not just one flood, but cycles of judgment and preservation throughout time. In some Guizi manuscripts preserved at monasteries like Debra Libanos and Aksum Sion, there are oral traditions transcribed alongside canonical texts that speak of the Noahs of old. These accounts, often dismissed by Western translators as folklore, hold that God sent multiple anointed ones before and after the flood across various lands, each bearing the same charge, to protect the remnant of the just, to carry divine law, and to rebuild after the wrath of the heavens. In this broader vision, the flood becomes not a singular event but a recurring pattern of divine cleansing and renewal, a cosmic rhythm in which Noah-like figures rise to shield life and truth. The Ethiopian concept of time, rooted in cyclical prophecy rather than linear history, supports this view. Their calendar itself reflects this, a unique 13-month system based not only on solar movement but ancient Hebraic timekeeping. This perception bleeds into their theology, where figures like Noah, Enoch, and Melchizedek are not trapped in singular moments of history but reappear across epochs, reborn in purpose if not in flesh. It mirrors the mystical thought found in Kabbalistic Judaism, in which archetypes and souls recur through divine reincarnation and holy mission. This multi-Noah concept also aligns with African oral storytelling, where the preservation of wisdom is more important than rigid chronologies. Ethiopia, untouched by European conquest until the 20th century, retained its independence and thus the purity of these traditions. Its scribes, trained not just in copying but in memory and recitation, were the guardians of pre-imperial Christian theology. It is in these sacred institutions, cliffside monasteries, rock-hewn churches, and torchlit caves, that the deeper meanings of Genesis remained alive. There, Noah was not just a man on a boat, but a symbol of divine survival, reincarnated through the generations. Even the Ethiopian Kebra Nagast, the national epic and theological political document of Solomonic descent, preserves themes that echo this multiplicity of Noahs. It places Ethiopia in the heart of the biblical story, suggesting that divine favor and sacred lineage did not terminate with Israel, but extended into Africa. It speaks of lost books of Enoch, of hidden rivers from Eden still flowing beneath Ethiopian soil, of descendants of Shem who came to dwell in the mountains of Cush. In these stories, the spiritual legacy of Noah is passed like a torch across millennia, never dying, only changing hands. While Western historians have long dismissed these variations as heretical or mythical, recent archaeological and textual discoveries are challenging such arrogance. The Dead Sea Scrolls found at Qumran include fragments of Jubilees and Enoch once thought lost, confirming that these were widely read in early Jewish communities. Their survival only in Ethiopia until their 20th century rediscovery in Israel raises questions about the flow of sacred knowledge and the geographic biases of modern biblical scholarship. In light of these Ethiopian texts, Noah is best understood not merely as an ancient patriarch but as a cosmic role, one filled by different individuals in different eras, each called to guide the few through the chaos of the many. It is a radical idea, one that disrupts the Western monopoly on biblical interpretation and repositions Ethiopia not on the margins of sacred history, but squarely in its center. Perhaps this is why the Ark of the Covenant, said to be resting in Aksum, Ethiopia, remains such a potent symbol, not just of Moses and the Exodus, but of divine preservation in all its forms. Ethiopia's ancient books whisper that what was once lost is not gone, and that sacred truth survives not always in power, but in quiet, mountainous corners of the world, written in forgotten tongues, waiting to be heard.